Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Figuring Things Out podcast with me, Will Brown. Today, once again, we are opening up the mentorship for a Q&A session with my good friend and long-term collaborator, Simeon. If you're someone who needs support, if you're wanting to become the coach you wish you had, then this could be the right place for you. If you want to know more, please visit www.figuringthingsout.com/mentorship. Without further ado, let's dive right into the conversation. First question is quite apt. I think one of the crew members asks, how do you overcome the fear or the anxiety of putting yourself out there, being not only the coach, but the social media solopreneur, the person who has to share their ideas, their philosophy, their wins via social media, whether it's short form, long form, as we're doing right now in a more podcast format. What have we done to kind of overcome that fear? What do you think? Are you afraid? I've never known you to be too afraid.
Oh, I actually had pretty severe stage fright, especially during school years. It went away a bit during university years, because then obviously you have to present and you have to be in front of a class and put yourself in these situations much more. And it kind of just with practice and exposure, it went away a little bit. It's not that I don't have a feeling of fear. It's just that it doesn't paralyze me at all. It's more like I don't know. It's a bit of excitement and wow, this is happening now and it's recording and blah, blah, blah. But it's not causing me to just choke up and go, crazy about it.
I said a lot, the kind of etymology of courage, the feeling of taking action even though your heart rate's up and kind of feeling a bit apprehensive. And I think that's really apt in this scenario of just being able to do the thing you need to do, even if you are a little bit worried. And maybe the old adage, fake it till you make it, is relevant here as well. Sometimes it's important to pretend like you know what you're doing, or pretend like you're competent, and the competence comes with practice. Because we're all essentially in a place of not quite knowing what we're doing, and in therefore that process of faking it till we make it. And some people are really good at lying. Some people are really good at putting a front on and just presenting. I've got a couple of buddies who are, have a fairly large social media following, and their ability to just switch on almost like a persona, where they have a, they have a dress on, they have their armor on maybe, and they put on the voice, they put on the facial expression, they go into the mode. Something that I played a lot with and did, especially towards the beginning of my career in this type of work, is wearing different hats. And just imagining that when I enter a space, I have the specific hat I require to do whatever it was I needed to do. And this was, for me, it was really important in larger group settings. When I'm walking to do a workshop in a new country with a big group of people that I don't know, there's a certain feeling of just switch it on, be in the moment and go for it. And I really love that feeling, to be honest. I've come from a place of being really anxious about doing that to then completely being absorbed in the feeling of owning a space, leading a space, sharing ideas and content or ideas, work for people that really hopefully resonates. But even if it doesn't, just being in the moment. And I think there's a really clear distinction in my mind that I can remember in my own experience of times in which I was having to put on this hat and failing, and times where I put on the hat and succeeded. And the differential is, how do I say this? Self-awareness. Self-awareness is the wrong word. Being aware of myself. I can't quite think of the word I mean. When I've succeeded, I haven't second-guessed or been out of my body looking at myself in third person. I've been fully present and in the moment. And when I failed, quote-unquote failed, I felt awful because I was almost observing myself from a third person. My internal monologue was questioning this word I used, or questioning this way of saying things, or questioning the act that I did, rather than just presenting fluidly. And I think when it comes to sharing on social media, people are really perceptive. And resonance, as we speak a lot about in the mentorship course, resonance is hugely important. If you're not resonating with your audience and the people that you have, whether they're followers or whether they're clients or students, they're not stupid. They really understand, and they feel, maybe before they understand, if you're trying to bullshit them. And it's such a key part of our job, I think, especially in the online sphere, is to be really open and honest with people, because communication is the fundamental aspect of any good coaching process. You can have the best program in the world, but if you don't have the communication skill to actually work with someone and work with their unique disposition and work with their unique lifestyle, then there's no way of moving forward and getting them actually into this amazing program. I think it's a really nice question. I don't know how we can maybe encapsulate this into one distinct tip, but I think for me, the having different hats really helps.
Yeah, definitely. Also, like, now that I think about it, one thing that really helped me become more confident was just getting really good at what I was doing or presenting, and just having confidence in my understanding of the topic. But then also, and that's kind of the other side of the coin, not being like afraid to make mistakes, and in the sense of like having this feeling that you have to do everything perfect and that you can't mess anything up. Because so in the beginning, for me, presenting was kind of and it obviously it is, but it was an extreme like performative setting for me. So I thought like when I'm standing there in the front row, like I have to perform. But that's not really what it's about. It's like learning together and like sharing something and figuring things out together. And once you have that, or once I had that mindset shift a little bit from like me being the person who's like the performer and the one who knows it all, to just a guy who's spent some time on a given topic, knows some stuff, still makes mistakes and just shares, and then it's kind of, yeah, it's not that bad. Like I didn't I just wasn't as afraid of mistakes anymore as I was before, if that makes sense.
The stakes are lower.
Yeah, in a way, but it's kind of like, not sure if it's a good example, but it's like with discussions also, like for me, that was a big shift, because in school we sometimes did this playing discussions, essentially. Like you would get a role or a certain position, and then you would have to beat some other person in the discussion. And at some point I was like, what's the point of a discussion? Is the point to beat somebody in an argument, or is the goal to grow together? Like what do you want to accomplish? And it's a different context. It's not the same thing. But again, for me, it was like this like mindset shift of how I view that thing and what I want to gain out of it and what I want everyone else to get out of it. That kind of helped me.
Yeah. So let's say, speaking in different contexts, I think both of us right now are relating very heavily towards live presentation, in-person presentation, workshop, one-to-one classes, whatever. But this question comes from and is relating to, I think, maybe more the online space, and especially presenting through long form, short form media on social media. So I wonder, when it comes to you in your experience so far in sharing on social media in different formats, what have you done to bolster your approach? What have you done to feel more comfortable in your approach of sharing through social media that is maybe different to in person?
Yeah, I feel like it's similar, actually, teaching online workshops via Zoom or something like that. and just recording. The issue with recording is that you can always redo stuff. And so, yeah, that's also the biggest thing for me, that I really have to be like, okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. And at some point I was just like, okay, I give myself like 3, 4, 5 tries max, and then you have to make something out of that because otherwise you'd be there all day. So I think that's like the main difference then between talking to the camera in a live setting versus recording. And for both situations, I find it helpful to actually press record in advance and just have the camera roll a little bit. So that's something we did not do now, but whenever I'd like start, like I just taught a Zoom workshop last week. And so I hopped on and I pressed record, and it was like recording for 4 or 5 minutes before the first person even like came in. But because always whenever I press record, there's this, oh, I just pressed record and now things are weird. Yeah. And stakes are high. And once
build.
when you press record and you're like, it's just like running right now and I'm going to cut it anyway. And then people come in, and kind of that initial barrier and that initial like weird feeling, because it is kind of a weird situation at the moment. Yeah. Now's the moment.
Now is it?
It's already gone. And so that kind of helped me. And that's also what I do when I record. Like I don't always start and stop, and like I just let it run, and then
find the good bits later.
Look for the good takes. Yeah.
I think that's a really good tip, actually. It's just to almost use takes as a way of getting the apprehension away. So just letting something roll, maybe doing 1 or 2 versions of your social media presentation, short form piece, whatever it may be, but doing it a few times without stopping and starting, just so you get sunk into the process and the rhythm and what you're trying to say. And I agree. I think whenever I'm doing a voiceover for any tutorials, for example, I do that quite a lot, where I'll explain it 2 or 3 times. Maybe I want to try and get, a specific amount of information in a minute or 2 minutes. I'll do that multiple times, talking about one specific drill, for example, just so I can really come to terms with what I'm trying to say at what moment and how that fits together in a way that's cohesive and understandable, which is incredibly similar to then presenting to for a reel, let's say. I was giving some feedback to a student recently on, he wanted to make a video for his homepage, for his website. But the initial 15 seconds had 5 or 6 cuts because he pressed record, built that apprehension, and had a complete brain fart when he was starting the piece. And rather than doing it again and feeling comfortable, he just tried to cut all of the weird ums and ahs away from it. And it started a bit like, and it feels like the internet's gone, but it's just him cutting the piece together. And I think it's really important from a resonance perspective to actually have a normal human interaction through the interface of technology. And the more you can self-regulate, the more likely someone is to trust you and to listen to you and to understand what's going on. If you're someone who's stuttering through something with cuts and ums and ahs, and it's not calm and considered, it's probably less likely to be taken on. And interestingly, that's where I think people who ramble sometimes do well, because they're so comfortable in what they're talking about. They're not trying to force things on you. They just talk about the thing that they're passionate about. And I've got a specific YouTube account on my mind that I won't share, but he's awful at rambling, and his videos are 4 times as long as they need to be. But because he just fully is in the process of what he's sharing, he's so calm and so in the moment. It doesn't matter if he's talking to you or he's talking to himself. There's a feeling of resonance because he's going to do it whether 1 million people watch it or no one watches it, which in a way builds a bit of trust, because it's not a snake oil salesman that's trying to make you believe in what they're talking about. It's just, I'm doing this either way. Take it or leave it. which is an interesting trust exercise, let's say. Let's go to question number 2, if you haven't got anything more, because I think there's maybe an interesting conversation to have further. The question is on reloads, or what we call reloads or deloads. Most people will understand them. I tend to call them reloads due to the positive inclination of it. So a deload is a drop in volume at a given point of a phase or a cycle. And I tend to call it a reload because it has a bit more of a motivating structure. So a reload, I think about pulling back a bow to spring forward again, whereas a deload feels a bit like you're kind of down and a bit kind of depressed maybe, and you're taking a bit of time off and you're being lazy. And I don't want to have that connotation with a reload. And the question is, if I'm feeling good, are reloads really necessary? Do I need them for physical and psychological recovery, or can I skip it and push forward? What do you think?
Yeah, that's actually a pretty loaded question. But like I'm trying to go the short route first. So if you're making good gains and you genuinely feel great, you don't have to take a reload. That said, and that's kind of the other side of it, is like reloads tend to work best when you take them while you still feel like relatively decent, not when you're already like burned out. And with that, it's also important to understand that pulling back the training load for a week every 4 to 8 weeks or so is not going to kill your progress. If anything, for most people, it helps sustain it over the long term. So that's why what you said, like this idea of a reload, that gets us going over the long term is really helpful there. And again, reiterating, we're not losing anything in taking a week off. So that's kind of the short answer. But then I think there are 2 more layers to this question. And one is the discussion about, should reloads be pre-planned or more reactive? And I don't know, what's your take on this?
First of all, I completely agree. I think for me, when I talk about reloads of students, I talk about them as a consistency protocol. So I want a reload in place first and foremost to drive long-term consistency. And I think of this like the stock market, right? Like everyone that's got a savings account will be very happy with slight ups and downs, so long as the average trend over a period of time is upwards. This is relating to interest. But if you've got an account that's trending upwards, that has a huge drop off, and then it goes up again, and then you go a bit more, and then it drops off again. There's an inherent volatility there, which is providing a lot of inertia, and it's difficult to see a safety in a long-term process. And this is akin or the same as a training phase. If you're someone who's working out and you're progressing really well, and then you drop off a cliff, and then you have to work really hard and use loads of inertia to then bring yourself back to where you were before, and then you train a bit more, and then you drop off a cliff again. It's very hard to see and sustain long-term progress. But if you're someone that's kind of trending upwards, have a small blip, deload, go again, deload, and again, deload or reload. Over time, you really see the clarity and the compound interest in that practice. And so for me, when I see a reload, it's very much as a contingency plan for long-term continuous practice, consistent practice. I'm interested to know your 2 caveats. I'm wondering if there's a third one, but I'm preempting what you're going to say. So I'd invite you to give me the 2 caveats, and I will maybe add a third if it's not included.
Yeah, I mean, not really caveats, but like again, the discussion on like having reloads pre-planned versus reactive. I think, so the short answer again is both can work, but I guess it really comes down to knowing yourself and your tendencies. So if you're someone who naturally pushes hard and you tend to maybe ignore early warning signs or you struggle to take time off of the gym, and that's me 100%, then reactive reloads might be a bit more risky because you might just go over the edge. Like what I said, reloads are best taken when you're not too deep into the hole, but you're actually just kind of dropping off and not completely crashed. So that's a bit more difficult if you're that type of person. And in that case, having reloads loosely planned at least can act as a safeguard so that, every 4th to 6th week maybe is a reload. It doesn't have to be every 4th week. It doesn't have to be every 5th, but like somewhere along those lines, you should take one. But on the other hand, if you're, I don't want to say more in tune with your body, but if you're the type of person who can be a bit more honest about your fatigue level and, you're not always pushing the limits as hard, then a reactive approach where you just go by, different metrics can work just fine. And those metrics then could be a multitude of things. So an obvious one would be performance. If you just find yourself not being able to perform better or even at the same level over the course of 2-3 weeks, that's a pretty strong indicator. If you're tracking heart rate, if you find your resting heart rate going up, that's an indicator. If you don't feel well, you're not feeling as motivated to work out, you have to drag yourself to the gym more, that's another sign. So there's multiple layers of fatigue that we can kind of track and look at. And if I'm tracking these well and I'm really honest with myself, then a more reactive approach where we don't have pre-planned weeks off can work just fine. But as I said, when I'm coaching myself and I'm writing programs for myself, I know that I can't do that well.
Yeah.
So it's just
I think what I was going to say regarding the caveats or the subpopulations that are important would be undertrained or underexperienced versus experienced populations, and then male versus female, which I know is a taboo, but I'll explain why. So first of all, we'll go under versus overexperienced, or experienced versus not experienced. And for me, how I like to work is if I have a beginner to intermediate athlete or student, I usually have kind of mandatory reloads programmed in, usually every 4th week in a 6-week kind of block, just as a kind of guaranteed backstop to make sure that we're not overtraining initially and we can start to get into a working relationship and I can start to understand how this person is relating to the training, how they're improving, so on and so forth. And once I have someone who's more intermediate to advanced, then I open up to auto-regulation, so kind of reactive deloading or reloading, where I give them the reins. And usually that means that I am trusting of the person enough to be like, you know your body best, and you know when you need to deload, and I trust that you will deload. Because I have also some people that I work with who are intermediate to advanced that I don't have the feeling like they're willing and able to actually hold themselves back. And so I still use a kind of 4th, 5th week kind of deload just to make sure, from my point of view, I can undulate enough to keep them moving without them overtraining and not being able to sustain the practice. So that's kind of overtrained and undertrained, let's say. And then we have male, female. And the elephant in the room is the time of the month for a female and the period cycle. And I think it's really important to accept and acknowledge that it is a very different process for a male who doesn't have these monthly dips in energy or volatility, let's say, whatever the female may experience in that 4 to 7 day period. So when I'm working with female students, what I do is I directly give them the autoregulation. I don't care how experienced they are. I just trust that they're more in tune with their monthly cycle. And I encourage them to take a deload when they need it through that cycle. Whether it's in, week 2 or week 5 or week 6, it doesn't matter to me, because what's most important is that they're in tune with that cycle, and they're listening to that cycle, and they can make progress over a longer period of time. It's just simply a different process that we have to accept. And I think a lot of the research in sports science is maybe done more towards males, or people that are not maybe abiding by the natural rules of a cycle that a lot of Gen Pop females have to abide by and should abide by. That's why I say it's a different masculine, feminine, male, female process. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree. Yeah, female athletics is a huge thing coming up. Like we actually at uni we had like a lecture series on this topic just not last year, 2023 I think it was. Doesn't matter. But yeah, you can really see like people showing interest, and obviously it's a super important topic, and it's not just in sports science, it's in science in general, where like female population is pretty under represented, which is crazy. Yeah, I like the approach that you take, because yeah, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, there's not really it's not like we can pinpoint certain phases of a cycle where we know that people are going to be stronger or weaker or perform better or worse. It's really individual. We know that it does affect a lot of females, not everyone to the same degree. Like it's individual already, and already not trying to have, a template X where, whenever you're at this stage of your cycle, you have to deload, or that's where you have to push, and blah, blah, blah. That just doesn't make sense. So, because that's also something like cycle-based training and like structuring your training around the cycle. I think the wrong approach there would be to try and look at what's like scientifically the best stage to push and to deload and whatever. But yeah, really auto-regulate and see for yourself what works for you, because it's hugely individual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
That's a great point, actually.
One detail that might be important to accept as well, and this is coming from more like Westside Barbell conjugate systems, is deloading doesn't necessarily have to mean dropping the volume, even though classically it is, or reloading. It can also mean just a change in stimulus, a variation, which in turn might mean that you have to do less intensity or less volume because it's a new thing or a different thing, or a more or less skill-based movement. And therefore, even if you're training a similar or same body part or section or movement pattern, you have to have a different approach. And therefore, in a sense, it is a deload or a reload. And so this is also maybe worth commenting in this section of the conversation, that it's not. It usually is, and in my process, it almost always is a drop in volume. And I see it like a revving of the engine. So you maintain the same intensity, but you just cut the amount of kind of systematic fatigue and damage to the physiology, sorry. But you're also able to utilize a variation in the same way. And this is something in my own practice that sometimes I do if I don't feel that my system is too fatigued, and 15, 20 years of training, kind of I can intuit this maybe a bit better. Sometimes it's just a different variation, and I'll just do a different kind of variation of the thing that I'm doing, just to give myself a slightly different feeling in a session, and then back on plan, which I think is working. To add to your previous point about how to test your fatigue level, something that I think is really approachable and really applicable and really important is grip strength and the feeling of the skin in the hands. And also maybe wrist stiffness is also relevant for those that are doing handstands. If your wrists are feeling incredibly stiff compared to other times, or they're feeling weak, brittle, this is a a very clear sign that you're probably fatigued on a systemic level. I know it's very common in studies to measure fatigue. One of the common ways of doing that is simply with a grip test. I think that's a really good indicator if you have some way of testing your grip, or even if you just hang every day, which I think most people should be doing. It's a really easy gauge of your on the day fitness, your preparedness, let's say, to actually train hard. If you can usually hang from a bar, 2-armed, 1 arm, whatever it may be, with a certain feeling, and then it changes really quickly. It's probably a really good sign of needing to reload. And just curating these small data points in your own sense of practice is really important to keep, again, the sustainability long term.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's also something we dive a bit deeper in the mentorship. So essentially, what my recommendation for like monitoring, if you're going that route, is to think of the different systems that can fatigue. So, for example, heart rate would be a cardiovascular measure, right? Whereas grip strength or jump height, something like that, would be more neural force output. Something like muscle soreness would be something you can take for the just not necessarily muscle damage, but also it like muscle soreness and muscle damage is also an interesting topic. It's not 1-to-1, but like it's still a decent indicator, and just for muscular fatigue in general. So you have different markers for different physiological systems, and also then psychological motivation and how you're feeling. And you don't have to have like super complex or like complicated ways to measure the stuff. Like the simple stuff works best usually, because this really thrives on being able to do it regularly, day by day, and tracking loads of data points, as opposed to having some super intricate and high-tech measurement once every quarter or something. That doesn't tell me much, at least when it comes to day-to-day monitoring. So thinking about like the different systems that can be affected by fatigue, and then simple ways to get data points there. It's really helpful.
Love it. Let's move on if you're done.
Yeah.
We have 2 other questions that are both rabbit hole potentials. So the next question we'll move to is talking about plateaus, which I think is a very relevant kind of addition to this second question on reloading. And this person asked basically, when I feel like I'm hitting a plateau, or a student hits a plateau, is it relevant to eat more? Does it help? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's I'd say a common experience that, yes, while we're in a surplus, when we're eating more, people do tend to feel stronger. But I think it's important to stress that it's not like eating more doesn't mean that we get automatically stronger just because we eat more. In the long run, obviously, if we're in a surplus, that's going to be beneficial for muscle growth, yada, yada, yada. That's going to help. But usually, I think this is a discussion on the topic of recovery, and specifically in the terms of like how many calories we eat. This could be an issue of underfueling. So when we increase calorie intake, we start to eat more, and we very quickly find that we recover better. We feel fresher in the sessions, we feel stronger, we're making more progress. It might just be a case of us underfueling the system, where the recovery and adaptation simply lag behind the training stress because we haven't provided sufficient nutrients.
Yeah.
But it's also important that, like, if you're plateauing, the first question I'd ask is, are you recovering well? And food intake would be one element of the equation, but never the whole story. So overall training load and life stresses, sleep, whatever else is going on is just as important. It might just be that you need a reload, what we just discussed. It might be that your just accumulated fatigue is high, that masks the adaptations you made during training, and you just have to allow the system to reset. And maybe after reload, you feel better, stronger, and start making progress again. It might be that some other form of stress outside of training now takes away from your ability to recover, and the same training load that used to work is now simply too much. So that might also be a case that something else takes away from your recoverability and you have to change something in your training load and your programming. Might also be, and that relates directly to the programming, that your training loads are maybe not well distributed. So if you find that you're not progressing anywhere and like everything goes down the drain, then it's probably you're just doing too much. You can't recover. You need to step off the gas. But if you can progress in very specific aspects, maybe the other stuff, maybe the program is just too busy, and for you to make progress in something specific, something else has to be put on the back burner so that you can put more of your resources into that thing that you want to progress. So yeah, as you say, there's so many different moving parts that we have to address here. And simply thinking about food intake is not enough, in my opinion. But it's correct that it might be a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I agree. I think what's probably futile is just to say, am I eating enough? As you said, it's completely dependent on the situation, but also on what the intake is. And to go a bit deeper into that, not only what the intake is, but how the person deals with the intake. Are you the type of person that can digest dairy, or are you limited by dairy? How is your fiber intake? How is the macronutrient variety? What are you biased towards? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to gain weight? Are you trying to lose weight? Are you in a sport or working on a skill that requires a certain strength to weight ratio or a weight class? There are so many factors here that it's not so simple to say to eat more. However, to keep things simple, sometimes it is a nice metric to use to say, for me, what I try and do is on a very simplistic level, because I don't give nutrition coaching, is to say, eat more of the things that make you perform better. It's usually, unless someone's cutting for a competition or something, usually it's a case of, so long as you feel better and you perform better, usually on average, doing this, it's probably the right thing to do, to listen to your body. I want to take a step back because you mentioned a nice point there. I wrote down the word hierarchy. And so what I really try and do when we talk about plateauing, I really try to force students to dictate the hierarchy of goals and to really be clear with the fact of, okay, what is my number one thing that I'm chasing? What is my two? What's my three? Because if you're plateauing, it may be, as you said, that the training load is just too much and you have to take the foot off the gas. But that can feel really demotivating and quite stressful. So what's important, or in my perspective as a coach, what's key is that you want to try and keep your foot down and the direction clear on the main goal, at least the main one goal. Because you can then drop other things aside and still keep one focus and still keep one progression arc. And so maybe you've got someone that wants to work on the handstand as their number one goal, but they also want to work on the one-arm chin-ups, the middle splits, the X, Y, and Z. And there are so many different varieties of stimulus in the body that actually it's futile to chase all at once, but it's also maybe futile to actually drop everything at once, because then you don't have any clarity about, well, is it training load or is it something else? So something also I try to do when I'm programming is to have variables in not only the volume and intensity in general, but also in specific goals and intentions. So maybe I have someone that wants to really then push the handstand, but drop back on their one-arm chin-up in the middle split, whatever I said the other two goals were. And keep these on maintenance, give the body a bit of rejuvenating work in these sessions relating to their goals, and just keep the A priority moving forward. And this helps with the motivation, it helps with the overall fatigue level, and it gives us a chance to really assess what's going on and make a logical step forward. And I think with a plateau, that's quite important. You don't want to only ever stop everything, sit back, feel lazy, get demotivated, and not actually have the inertia to move forward again. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there as a hierarchy is really important. And it's something that I do a lot with every single student I work with is, be clear with what you want, set the North Star, and then chase it. You can change it after a period of time if it's not serving you, but make a choice at the start of a process and go as far as you need to before you change that direction. And that's the best way, in my opinion, through 15 plus years of chasing random goals in different directions to actually see progress, not try to do everything at once and maintain all the all the things that you've achieved and have a big swag bag over your shoulder of all the skills that you've accumulated and you're maintaining, and you've got a 9-hour routine to maintain. It's like, no, just focus on the thing that inspires you right now, go for it, chase it, and then drop the other stuff. Be okay to let things go. That's such an important part of any training practice. And for me, the figuring things out aspect of this is very much drive towards what inspires you and excites you, and be completely okay emotionally to drop the other stuff. You don't have to maintain. I think movement culture had this whole push to, oh, my thing is on maintenance mode, but I'm still progressing. It's like, it doesn't make sense, dude. Just do the thing that you want to do. Move forward in the area that you want to progress in, and be okay to drop other things. Or if you want to maintain something, cool, maintain it. But don't keep the swag bag dragging, and as you go through your life of training, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then after 15 years of training, you just can't do anything new because you've got to maintain 15 of the things that you've learned.
Yeah, right. I was going to say, at some point, you just can't even take a single step forward because it's so much stuff. Yeah.
I think it's a moronic perspective in hindsight, maybe, because at the beginning of maybe my practice, I thought, oh yeah, I've accumulated a new skill or a new level, like in a game, and therefore I want to go to the next level. And things mark you anyway. Things change you anyway. No matter if you can still do the thing, it doesn't matter. I've had periods in my life where I've achieved, a one-arm chin-up or a one-arm handstand or a shoulder press, or like quite serious adult gymnastic level stuff. Can I still do them? No. Does it make me a bad person? No. Do I care? No. Will I achieve them again? Maybe, probably. Who knows? Depends what I find interesting. The important thing is that I went on that journey, I learned the process, I achieved what I wanted to achieve, and then I looked at the next thing. It's almost like when you climb a mountain and you can't stay on the top of the mountain and also do the next one. You've got to come back down again and do something different. Or keep doing the same mountain, but it doesn't really make sense. Anyway,
yeah,
I digress.
And then also revisiting old stuff that you lost. Usually it comes back quicker and quicker, with newfound understanding once you revisit it. I'm saying usually. It does depend a little bit. Like, I have a very different experience right now with the bridge. But there was also a bit of an injury going on. So, it doesn't come back as easy. But usually I'd say, like, especially if it's something that's like very skill oriented, like getting back into a sport or something that does not, like, if you've squatted or, I don't know, bench pressed absurd numbers, like, even then it's going to be easier to get to a high level of strength there. Maybe not the level that you were at, but even after a long time off, you're going to find yourself being, relatively speaking, compared to the rest of the population, just way back up there very quickly. Maybe not your best, but pretty quickly. Yeah. And that's in like endeavors that are like not very skill oriented, right? So something like a bench press is not very skill oriented. But then if we take something, like a sport that is majorly like influenced by skill level, you're gonna find yourself like it just comes back fairly quickly. It's like, yeah,
I actually had this last
it's
week.
like relearning. Yeah, it's like when you learn something in school or university or wherever, and then you forget it, and then you have to relearn it at some point. It's crazy how quickly it comes back. Like I took chemistry as a what do you call it? I'm not sure. You have the major in university, and then
Minor.
what's minor? Is it, yeah, that's what you call it?
We don't really
Major and
have
minor. That
joint
format,
degrees
right?
much in the UK, but
Yeah, yeah,
America, I think in Germany the same.
yeah, yeah. So I guess chemistry, like minor in chemistry, and I just remember that like we had this. So we had one topic very early on in our studies, and then not at all for like 2 years, and then at the end we had to learn it again because we had it in another exam. And in the beginning, I was like, dude, how? Like I forgot everything. It took me 3 weeks to learn to relearn and then deepen my understanding of what I had learned over course of like a full semester, half a year.
Yeah, well,
Within 3 weeks. And yeah, that just goes to show it's the same with movement. Like even if you lose something, if you really want it back, like you can go for it and it's probably there.
So I experienced last week, I was obsessed with football, soccer as a kid. And I played, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times a week until I was like 17 years old. I was completely convinced I was going to be the next David Beckham. Like that was just my life, my whole teenage years. I didn't really do anything else to a serious level. And then it was quite traumatic when it ended because it was kind of everything to me. And it, of course, ended. And long story short, I haven't played since. Not played since. I've kicked a ball around every now and again, maybe in no game style and no competitive style, on my own, doing some keepy-uppies. If a ball comes to me in a park and a kid's running after it or something, I might kick it back, but really nothing. And then I got asked to play in like a social league recently. And I was like, interesting. Why not? And I went in saying, I'm really nervous. I've not played for 15, 16 years. I really don't know what I'm going to have left, if anything. And it's it's a competitive side. They wanted to do good. They knew I was training. They knew I was able to move around, but they weren't really sure, my football skill. And I went in there and, after half an hour, all of a sudden things were just coming back and ways of moving the body and the feeling of the touch of the ball and the view of the pit, whatever it was, it came back so strongly. And I really thought, wow, this is such a testament to the depth of obsession almost I had for this skill. But adversely, I've also had other things that I've done nowhere near to the depth and obsession as football that I've gone back to a few years later and I've lost everything. I know nothing. Chess, I've dabbled with chess over the years. And I had a long period where I didn't play chess and I came back. Useless. Rubik's Cube, same. Just small examples, but I really think it's a level of, there's a threshold to what the neurological system almost marks as important before it goes. There's also the saying, last in, first out, maybe is also relevant. Football was kind of the first thing in or one of the first things in, so it's most likely going to be the last thing out comparative to chess and the Rubik's Cube. But I do wonder if there's a threshold to kind of how much the neurological system really holds on to.
Yeah, I guess it's difficult to think of it, or not difficult. Yeah, thinking of it as a threshold is difficult because there's not going to be like this one point where you're like, I practiced this many hours, now it's there. Obviously, it's going to be more fluid. But yeah, definitely like the amount of time and high quality practice you like that you spend on something is gonna dictate how long you'll be able to retain it and how quickly it comes back. So if you've got something that you were really invested in, spent a lot of time in, practiced a lot, then that's going to be different from something that you dabbled with for 2 months or so. Like that's not comparable. Like
For sure.
I've spent so much time in Eskrima, for example, and so stick fighting, and I've had periods where I didn't train it basically for like two years or so, like almost none, because there's so much other stuff to do, right? So sometimes it just happens. You have certain aspects of your practice where you just go, holy smokes, I haven't done that in like forever. And first few minutes was terrible. By the end of the first session, it was like, okay, getting the hang of it. And like I said, again, within 2-3 weeks, couple of practice sessions, it's crazy how quickly that came back. If I had waited more, like not 2 years, but 10 years, like the retaining process would have taken much longer. And eventually, maybe I would have forgotten even more. And like if I waited like 40 years, maybe there wouldn't be much left there. So time frames matter. But that's just, again, testament to like having the ability to really dial in and focus on one thing and spend some time there and get good at it is going to pay dividends, because like when you cycle through and come back to this thing again in the future, it's going to pay dividends if you really went in instead of trying to juggle everything all at once. And then when you stop, you don't have really nothing to show for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
Yeah.
Let's move to the final question because we're running out of time, and it's, again, a big one. And this is quite an interesting question. There are different ways we can go about this, but I'll present it first. So it's all relating to the relationship between pushing scapular strength and pulling scapular strength. And the question is there an interrelationship, or if I improve my pulling scapular strength, will I also improve my pushing? And so what I would like to suggest we do is talk about force direction in relation to torso versus arm position, rather than pushing versus pulling. Because it's far more pragmatic, I think, in this context to discuss it, as opposed to lumping pushing and pulling. For example, if I'm talking about shoulder extension, it depends what I'm doing. If I'm doing a front lever, then I'm driving into shoulder extension, and therefore it would be classed as a pulling movement. But if I'm doing a manner, where I've got my hands in shoulder extension driving the same direction of force, it's a pushing movement. And so we can't be super clear with the differential with the terminology. So what I would like to suggest is we talk about kind of angle of the shoulder and the direction of force. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when we talk about scapular strength, it's also a bit of a loaded term. And so the scapular strength itself is not a determinant of the arm movement, but rather a stabilization of the arm movement. And maybe what I like to think of it is the connection between the arm and the torso and the engine and the transmission. So it's also a bit difficult to talk about, but let's just say top line, is there a translation between push and pull? What would your answer be?
Yeah, so interesting question. My take is that yes, to an extent, and it's more indirect rather than direct. And what I mean by that is, doing support holds on a parallel bar or working on the top position in rings is probably not going to increase the number of pull-ups that you can do. Although the direction of force for the scapula, obviously the arm position is different, but like the line of the pull, the direction of gravity, and how our scapulae have to resist is pretty similar. But still, it's not similar enough that it's gonna really directly carry over. That being said, having good scapular control and strength in general will provide a solid base to exert force on, whether that be in pushing or in pulling. If that makes sense.
I agree. I'm just drawing a small thing to help my mind work in this conversation. So I'll give a brief show of what I was drawn. Where's the camera? It's here. This small pingu here. And so basically what we have is a section of someone looking in this direction. This is the nose and the eye. And we have then kind of 4 clear directions. And every direction then has a kind of perpendicular force that we can look at. And that's basically an understanding of I can drive force in one direction or the other direction in each of these 4 separate directions. So for most people, we can talk about elevation, we can talk about protraction, we can talk about depression, and we can talk about retraction. And this is the arm and the scapular movement in relation to the body. When I'm elevating, usually what I'm doing is flexion of the shoulder, which is then lifting the arm up overhead. If I'm protracting, usually my arm is forward of the body, but it could be driving into flexion or extension, and that is dependent on this force. We then have depression, and again, we have then flexion, extension, and then we have retraction, and we have then again, flexion, extension. It's incredibly rare that in retraction, people will be able to, in extension and retraction, therefore, it's incredibly rare that someone's going to drive further into this range of motion because the shoulder doesn't really like to go in this direction. So it's a bit problematic to use this, but it is useful, I think. And so if we talk about, let's say, the arm in front of the body, and I'm protracting through the scapula, and I'm learning possibly a planche. I'm therefore resisting upwards as I'm pushing forwards. So I have the scapular resistance in the horizontal plane, and then I have a kind of flexion of the arm moving upwards. And this is resisting my body, and I'm holding the planche. But I can also have the same thing where I'm in this horizontal plane, but I'm driving pressure downwards in this direction, which would be a front lever. And so the comparable arm position in relation to the torso, but the force that I'm creating to move my body in space is inverse. And so it's really important to accept that even when I'm using the same range of motion, I may be doing the complete inverse action point. This is where I see there being a small link, but a completely opposing outcome. When I talk about, for example, how's the best way to describe this? The front lever and the planche, if we take a screenshot and we orient them the same way, the arm would be in exactly the same place relative to the torso, more or less. Somewhere here. The difference is the direction that I'm pushing or pulling force. And so there would be a differential in the internal stimulus on my body and the musculature used to fulfill the task. Does this make sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So to answer the question, I would say there is a relationship. Maybe I'm kind of reiterating what you said in more of a either a stabilization type manner or maybe as a coupling manner, stabilizing both sides of the joint or making sure forces acting on the shoulder are more even front to back or side to side. But there is not a specific gain. If you're looking to work on your planche, doing the front lever, for example, wouldn't help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Would you like to evolve that any further?
I think also a nice example where So if you think of a weighted dip, usually, so something I've heard people in the like street lifting community, so weighted calisthenics, essentially powerlifting for weighted calisthenics. So the competition lifts there would be like weighted pull-ups or chin-ups, weighted dips, sometimes the weighted muscle up, and then squat. It's just barbell squat. So something I heard from quite a few people is that the way they structure the session, they usually don't do the heavy pulling work before the dips. Because for the weighted dips, kind of the fatigue of the back from the pulling takes away the stability of the base that you need in the for the weighted dips, and it kind of messes with performance. So usually, and that's like I said, I heard it from quite a few athletes that they usually have dips first and then pull second. I personally also experienced the like reverse. So for me, but I also do dips in my home gym. I do them on the rings, so there's much more stability going on. Doing them on P-bars would potentially be different, but I find that if I do dips first on my on the gymnastic rings, it messes up with pulling afterwards completely. And it is potentially because all these stabilizing muscles around the shoulder and the shoulder blade do get fatigued already from the dips so much that they can't really do their job as well for the pulling then. So the kind of the the how do I say this? I really like this idea of resisting gravity that you used, Will, or this idea of like pushing, almost like pushing off a boat, where if you've got a boat floating in water and you try to jump off of it, there's an energy leak and the boat just goes in the other direction of where you're jumping, and then you can't jump as far. And that's kind of what happens when your scapulae aren't strong enough, aren't stable enough, you don't have the control. And in the case of like changing from going from dips right into pull-ups or going from pull-ups into dips, the fatigue from the prior exercise, although we're using different large muscle groups, still carries over, and there's kind of a bit of an energy leak and performance suffers. Although on paper, dips and pull-ups shouldn't interfere as much. That makes sense.
I think there's also a valid point here on the force vectors. And you're still moving through shoulder extension in both, or trying to at least. So whether you're doing a pull-up, if I look at the kind of humerus, it's kind of moving in the same plane. I'm not doing like this and then this is something, so it's either side of my body. So I wonder if there's also an influence there. An example that I think would be relevant, if we go back to the question of translation of one to the other, I think, again, using push and pull is not substantial enough, but if we go through range of motion or positions of the shoulder relative to the torso, if we look at something like a German hang or a skin the cat, where you're in shoulder extension and pulling or pushing, whichever one you want to call, in this direction, basically arm behind you, force going up and forwards into flexion of the shoulder from extension of the shoulder, is very useful to improve things like dips, because all I'm adding is the bending of an elbow. So the movement on the shoulder, whether it's a dip or whether it's, I can't do this because of the table, or whether it's the German hang, is almost the same. And so therefore the mechanism at the shoulder can be utilized in both scenarios to make progress. So there is a similarity if you match both. If I go back to my Pingu drawing, if you match both the position of the arm and the direction of force. If A and B are the same, there is a translation. If A and B are not the same, it's unlikely there is a translation. And if your weighted calisthenics powerlifters are correct, there may be even a negative influence. Maybe that's the answer everyone's needing. I really use this. I really use this a lot in the A and B scenario of position of the orientation of the shoulder compared to the torso and the direction of force. I use it hugely in accessory work. For example, if we're working towards a shoulder press, for example, or a planche, and I want some accessory work for the front of the shoulder, then I would do something like a front raise. So I'm moving through that same range of motion that I would be doing in the skill, and I'm gaining more muscle development or hypertrophy development in the same action, to give an example.
Yeah, definitely. I guess it, like, again, though, the specificity kind of is king here. And like, I think to summarize, like, depending on how you look at it, and like you said, like, just thinking about push and pull doesn't always help paint like the full picture. And depending on how you define these things, it's matter of like semantics, really. But like, a short answer, I guess, would be that it's usually, let's see if I can pronounce the word, negligible. How do you say?
Negligible. So close.
Yeah.
What is it in German? Let me try in German.
What would it be in German? Vernachlässigbar.
Vernachlässigbar. Oh, we cut that out.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, thinking about like the shoulder again, the shoulder is stabilized mainly through musculature, as opposed to something like a knee that's much more like, there's much more there's other structures, the joint itself, the whole bunch of ligaments, ACL, PCL, blah 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 blah, all that stuff that kind of guides how the joint moves and what range of motion is accessible. Whereas with the shoulder, it's like, it's a ball and socket joint. But if this is the hip joint, and for the listeners that like can't see this right now, but it's essentially a deeper socket in the hip. And for the shoulder, it's much more shallow. And so for there to be stability, we have muscles, the rotator cuff, that all also attach on the scapulae, right? So that's really like how like functionally the muscles of the scapulae are there to provide stability to the joint. And having solid control and strength generally in these muscles is going to provide a stable base, a stable joint that we can exert force through, whether that be in pushing or pulling or, you know, whatever, in any range of motion. But focusing on scapular push-ups is not gonna increase your pull-up number. Like, that's not how it works.
Correct.
So
I think that's a perfect roundup, mate. To go over the questions very quickly as a roundup. So question number 1, fear talking to the camera. I think probably the answer was exposure therapy. Fake it till you make it. Question 2, do I need to take a reload if I'm feeling good? Dependent. Short answer, no. Long answer, yes. Plateaus, should I eat more? Again, I think it depends. Short answer, yes. Long answer, maybe. And number 4, I think you did well there. I think it's a case of there is a relationship, but maybe it's not very specific, and you should just do the thing to get better, to make the gains you need.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, mate. Thank you so much for that. Guys, from the mentorship, I hope you enjoyed. Everyone at home, if you are interested, please let us know. We're more than happy to give you more information about that. You can join the community and start your coaching practice, or at least improve your coaching practice. Thanks for joining, mate. See you in the next one.
Bye-bye, guys. Thanks.